The Chief National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin is also live with us tonight. Jennifer, of course, lived in Israel for a number of years. Jennifer, what are you learning out of the Pentagon tonight? What do we think about the days-long event that Trey Yingst is referring to?
Well, Trace, I've been speaking to not only senior U.S. defense officials, but also to Israeli security sources. And in Israel, there is a belief that there will be, in the coming days, a ballistic missile strike by Iran in retaliation. They are prepared for that. They are preparing for that. But right now, the question is, how much disruption has there been to Iran's command and control? We know that at least two senior Iranian generals have been killed. Another has been hospitalized. We understand that a senior advisor to the Supreme leader has also been hospitalized. So clearly they were targeting also nuclear scientists. Clearly they wanted to, in these strikes that have taken place in Iran, to disrupt the command and control of Iran in order to mitigate some of the response that Iran is going to mount. Now, Iran has said for days that they will strike back, and they have said that they will hold the U.S. responsible for any Israeli strike. The U.S. has been very clear that the U.S. military has not been involved in this attack tonight. We have the statement from Secretary of State Marco Rubio. But I can tell you, just reading the tea leaves, looking back through the past few days, it's clear that the U.S. had an indication that Israel was going to strike either through intelligence or through direct talks. General Eric Kurilla, the CENTCOM commander, was supposed to head to Israel and be there on Saturday. That trip was postponed. He was supposed to testify on Capitol Hill today. We learned last night that that had been postponed as well. Steve Witkoff was supposed to be in Oman for the sixth round of nuclear talks with the Iranian foreign minister on Sunday. It's not clear whether he's still traveling to the region. But I think it's also very important to point out, Trace, that the U.S. is extremely vulnerable across the Middle East in terms of bases like the home of the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain, very vulnerable. And off the coast of Oman in the Arabian Sea, we know that the USS Carl Vinson, the aircraft carrier strike group, has been positioned. There are naval vessels in the region. It is, I would expect, and Israel has done an excellent job in recent months in terms of taking out proxies in the region, but you can expect those proxies will be looking at targets, both Israeli and possibly American. I think here, in terms of the military parade that's supposed to take place on Saturday for the Army's birthday and bring large crowds out to watch that military parade, that is now a massive security complication and possible target for anyone trying to disrupt things and to respond. Now that this Israeli military strike, which we expect will go on days, if not weeks, there will be an Iranian response. But as we've seen with the Iranians in the past, when they can't mount a direct military response, they often go to proxies and to terrorism. And I think that targets, American targets, Israeli targets across Europe and in the United States are all fair game at this point.
And I wonder, Jennifer, kind of talking about those proxies, we talk about, Hamas, and we talk about Hezbollah, the Houthis. If one of the proxies or Iran itself goes after American assets, is it your sense that the Americans will respond?
Well, the warning has certainly been given from the President of the United States on down that if Iran strikes American targets, American troops or civilians, there would likely be an American response. Right now, I think what you're seeing from the White House, the President plans to meet with his national security advisors at the White House at 11 a.m. tomorrow. What you're seeing is a very measured response. The U.S. does not want to be involved in this. They have been very clear about that. In fact, you even heard praise from Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, a Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee, praising the Trump administration for trying to pursue diplomacy and for not overreacting this evening. So from what I'm seeing, it's clear the U.S. would like not to be involved, but they are certainly in a defensive posture, both to help protect Israel as well as the 40,000 troops that are at bases across the Middle East tonight and are extremely extremely vulnerable to those Iranian proxies, as you mentioned.
Jennifer, on the right-hand side of the screen, we have Jerusalem, a live look at Jerusalem. It is early morning there. Is this live, by the way, Katie? Because when you hear these sirens, this is not live, but when the years you spent in Israel, I remember covering the war between Hezbollah and Israel. Jennifer, you and I were on a building near the Lebanon border up there. When you hear, this is a live look now, when you hear these sirens over Israel, I mean, what does that do to the people? What is that feeling like?
Well, I'm told from Israeli friends who are in Israel right now that when those sirens went off earlier tonight, it was clear there was not incoming at that moment, but it was clear at that moment that people knew that they needed to be close to a shelter, that they needed to know how to get to safety quickly, because there was this looming fear and feeling that Israel would take matters into its own hands and carry out strikes against Iran's nuclear program. The rhetoric this week has been building up toward that. So I think there was no surprise tonight in Israel when those sirens went off. But I can tell you from living there, which was your question, and this was back in the early 2000s when during the Iraq War, you expected that there could be chemical weapons being fired into Israel. We had to carry gas masks on our shoulders. It is a very, very scary sound, as you just heard. And also tonight in Iran on the ground, I'm sure the terror being felt by the civilian population there, who, as Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, said, is not the target of these strikes. They are trying to liberate the Iranian people from this very vicious regime.
Yeah, it's all great points. Jennifer Griffin, live for us at the Pentagon. Jennifer, we'll get back to you as the news warrants.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.